Meets World.
What up, bros?
What up, bros?
And welcome to Bruh Meets World.
When it's Bruh Meets World.
Your boy Meets World Fondcast. I'm Ceej.
I am Tony Coitus. What's up, bro?
Last night I went out to a restaurant and someone was like, "Oh, nice to meet you." I was like, and I'm used to. I think I was just like in the headset from our previous recording. I was like, "Oh, I'm Ceej," which I very rarely introduce myself as Ceej. So it was a interesting thing because he also had a very unique name. He's like, "Oh," and he like bonded over that, and I was like, "Oh, mine's just like a
Mine's
stage
a nickname.
Yeah.
Well, I have to tell people my name because my nickname is my initials. I don't know what happened in the 90s where people just started going by initials, but I've been called TC my entire life. But when I tell people my name's TC, they get it wrong. I get like AC, I get TJ, I get R2D2, I get everything in between. And so when I say Tony Curtis, when people hear TC, then they know and they get it.
It's funny because like we went to school together, and I tell people all the time, in one class we had TC, CJ, RJ, CW, and there were like a bunch of other ones. So I just answer to any two letters, like any two letters.
At this point,
like, yeah. Like I get that you're probably trying to get my attention. It is what it is. All right, well, we're excited back for another episode,
the last of the season. We're finally here.
It is. We've completed season 6.
You know what? I'm glad. I gotta be honest, this was probably the hardest season to get through. So
an ultimate season. I have to admit, if that's the case, I am scared to see what season 7 has to bring.
You know, it's interesting. I feel less hesitation going into season 7 because I feel like at this point, like there's no joy left in the show, especially with this episode.
I'm just like, so sad.
Do you agree or disagree?
Here's the thing. It's not that there's no... I won't say that there is no joy left to be had, because I think there are like fun romps that I remember from season 7.
Yeah,
but
romps.
Yeah, romps. But I don't know how much we're still learning. I'll say that much.
We'll have to wait and see. But
like,
I this season, there's a lot of unlearning happening.
Yeah, exactly. That's where I feel like I'm at. So that said, morning announcements. Before we dive in, as always, thank you guys so much for your emails, recording, feedback. Reach out to us at Bruh Meets World. Email us at bruhmeetsworld@gmail.com. Saying this because you guys have been really great and vocal at communicating with us on all of our platforms, and we are going to save, because we've gotten so many in the last few, we're going to save our responses for our season 6 recap. So make sure that you're listening to that season 6 recap, and we will kind of read, like, you guys have given us lots of feedback and lots of insights, and some theories that I'm excited to kind of like bring up, and like one that is even kind of a little relevant to this episode. So yeah.
Ooh, I'm excited. Yeah, guys, please definitely, whether it be through our website with the voice messages or through social media, give us your questions and opinions about season 6. Tell us your favorite episodes, what you liked, what you didn't like, so we can have a big conversation about it during our recap.
And finally, as we've been saying, we have a special request for our listeners. We're on a mission to reach 1,000 YouTube subscribers. Help us out by subscribing to our YouTube channel, sharing our videos, even
big ups to the fans, because as soon as you threw that announcement out, we got a bunch of YouTube subscriptions. So thank you guys. We appreciate it.
You guys are listening and actually helping us out. And then as with everything, short form content is like really pushing. So if you missed our shorts on TikTok or Instagram, YouTube has YouTube shorts, and those are performing very well. So
hey,
a little bit of feedback. Are you ready to get started with this episode?
Yes, I am ready to discuss this episode.
I mean, there's as we wrap up the penultimate season.
I have to say, there's a lot that happens in this episode. Let's just get into it, because
there is a lot that happens in this episode, which is why I want to kind of jump into it. But I think in order to get into this episode, we have to do a tell me about it.
Listen now, I couldn't fit everything about this episode into one little song, so I extended it out, so here we go. The Lawrences come back to town, ooh, and tell Topanga what marriages can do. Tell us about it. Yeah, Topanga questions love, sits through Feeney's wedding and cries as Cory wonders what the future lies. Tell us about it. Shawn and Eric finally talk and realize his love for Rachel is flat, but Rachel may realize the same about Jack.
That is a season finale. Tell me about it. I am so proud of you.
I honestly, there was too much in this episode. I had to build it out. Guys, there's a lot.
Well, thank you so much for that. For those of you who are following along, this is season 6, episode 22, State of the Unions. While Cory deals with his anxieties about his impending marriage, Topanga's parents come for a visit and reveal unexpected news. They're in the process of separating, which devastates Topanga. In a B storyline, Feeney and Dean Boulder announce their engagement and they agree to get married in the Matthews living room, which I want to talk about. Meanwhile, a self-pitying Eric asks Shawn for advice on how to cope with losing Rachel to Jack. That is the Wikipedia summary, and I feel like there is so much to get into. But before we do, I do want to do our roll call. And the list of guest stars, we have Bonnie Bartlett back as Dean, Lila.
Wait. So you're telling me that the actress who played the Dean was brought back to play that same role? Okay, yeah. Cool. I just want to check because there's a lot of that shit going on in this episode.
You can't take that for granted.
Not at all. Not with Boy Meets World.
Michael McKean plays Jedediah Lawrence, and Annette O'Toole is Rian Lawrence, which I did not know. Do you know they were a real life couple?
Yeah. No, that's all. Yeah,
I had no idea. So they were a couple in real life, the Lawrences, and as we've spoken about before, Bonnie Bartlett is also Will Daniels' real life wife. So we got like couples playing couples in this episode.
Intermarriages happening in this marriage-themed episode.
Exactly. And we also have Earl Bowen as the minister, which I just wanted to note because Earl is very, very popular and very famous. So
I was just going to say that I was a big fan of Annette O'Toole from Smallville.
That's what I was going to say. Martha. No. That's what I see
Martha
her
Kemp,
as.
Yeah.
Martha.
But to be clear, this is the first time we're introduced to Topanga's mom, period. So yeah, she can own that role. This is not the first Jebediah that we've seen. The first Jebediah that we saw was played by Peter Tork. Peter Tork, sorry.
Peter Tork. I said O'Toole. There you go.
So Peter Tork originally played Topanga's dad. And we'll get into it, but just the first impressions is like, who are these parents? Because they do not seem in any relationship to Topanga, to the show. I was like, how is Cory being introduced to them for the first time? Like, this is all kind of crazy that you've been engaged for a year. I don't know. It's a lot.
Well, there are a few things that I want to say to that. One is that this is not the first time he's meeting them. This is the first time that he's seen them since they've gotten engaged. But there is this trope, like Will talks about it in Pod Meets World, and it's actually really apparent in this episode. This idea of we've kind of forgotten the characters that we've written, and we're just doing tropes. This idea of Cory being like, the in-laws are coming, and you're like, why? Yeah. Why? Like, you've known Jebediah and theoretically Rian forever. Why would you be freaked out? And by the way, just because they are now your in-laws does not automatically make them the enemy or automatically mean that they're naggy and they hate you. And like, there's just so much weird like trope coming on from characters that we've met before, Jebediah, And Jebediah's personality is completely different.
Completely different. It doesn't make sense for them to, like, if the original Jebediah, the original character of Jebediah was present, they could have done the same storyline. They could have had it, but instead of it being this thing where Cory has this idea that the in-laws hate him because their daughter didn't go to Yale, the original Jebediah could have been like, you know what? We feel like a public education and, a higher education, have some kind of hippie leftist thought on it that relates to who the Lawrences are, which is the reason why Topanga calls them by their first names. It does not make sense for these couples to be called by their first name by this person, because he is like this, we've had 4 generations go to Yale, but I guess it's okay that this one didn't. It was like, who are you, bro? Like, this doesn't make sense for your character.
Absolutely. It's like they moved to Pittsburgh and then just became
Republicans.
Exactly. That's the perfect way to put that. You do not see these people raising a daughter like Topanga. But that said, maybe these people did raise this version of Topanga, because Topanga is also very different than I would have expected. And I would have liked a little bit of even Topanga being like, oh, I've changed so much, I need to be a little bit more hippie to make my parents feel comfortable. I would have liked for Topanga to be handing out note cards and being like, these are the things that my parents like to talk about and don't like to talk about, as a reminder, because we haven't seen them in forever. This episode is very weird because it kind of remembers the story that it's been telling, and it kind of brings up all these storylines, but at the exact same time it disregards the characters who experience those storylines.
100%. Like, how are you going to bring up Yale? How are you going to bring up the entire history? Oh, she didn't move to Pittsburgh, and they're going to be mad at me because of that. And so clearly you remember the seasons that came before it, but you don't remember season 3 when the actual Jebediah was on and had a complete character arc where he was friends with Amy. He made Alan that guitar.
Correct.
They should be close. There's a story where at one point Cory says our moms used to push a stroller next to each other around the block. So clearly Amy knows this woman too. So why are they shaking hands and being awkward? It just doesn't make sense. Why is Cory more comfortable with Chet than Topanga's parents? It just doesn't make sense.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. But then also, Alan and Amy are so weird this episode. Alan does impressions now. I was like, we've never seen Alan do impressions. What are we doing? Amy sings now. And I was like, don't get me wrong, I'm happy that Betsy's singing. But why is this something that all of a sudden Cory's like, hey, don't express these quirks that you've never expressed before? And all of a sudden, it's it's just so tropey. It's so calm. And go ahead.
I just want to guess, I feel like the central problem of this episode is that because the writers in the show did not decide to flesh out Topanga's family the same way they did for Shawn's family, that we have no idea who these characters are. We have no idea what the relationship is. Topanga has lived 5 hours away from her parents for the last 2 years, which is far, but it's not impossible. That's a drive from LA to San Fran. It's not unheard of. So why is it that they couldn't come to graduation? Where were they? There's so much weird stuff that they have to show, tell and not show, because they haven't taken the time to show it. And so to get all of this exposition about what these character arcs are like and who these people are, what their inner dynamics are, it just feels like a lot of just unloading this story onto us at the last minute versus building up to it. Get rid of the bullshit episodes that came this season and set this up right.
Thank you. You're right. We should have been building to this point. Kind of like we did with Eric. Where Eric's at, I'm that feels earned. And I really want to get into that later. But this doesn't feel earned. And it's interesting because we open up with Cory being like, hey, I've been having dreams lately, but the dreams all of a sudden go from, hey, I've been dreaming about killing Shawn, to, hey, all my dreams were actually about my impending fears about marriage, and you're the problem. So again, I'm just like, oh, how did Topanga become the problem in this situation?
It feels like Cory doesn't want to get...
Even with what we saw previously, she wasn't the villain in that dream. She just showed up in a wedding dress. So
he comes to him and she's like, hey, do you want to get married on Independence Day? He's like, Independence Day, getting married. That's funny. And I'm just like, dude, do you want to get married or not, bro? Like, was this your idea? Was it her idea? Do you care about this? Like, I have this whole episode is about Topanga's foundation and marriage being shaken. But like, this season was more about Cory getting on board with the marriage and like him like hanging out with college friends and taking his ring off, and like this has more been about his feelings about marriage. And then finally in the finale we flesh out how Topanga feels about it, and it just feels like too little too late.
That's a great point. Specifically the idea that when they come in and they're like, hey, Topanga goes, our parents got married young and they worked out. I was like, okay, I get that. That makes sense that someone would be like, my parents were able to do this, and that gives me the strength. But to your point, it feels like the moment she says that, I'm like, well, I know where this is going. Yeah. And then her parents come in and they're having this awkward fight. I'm with you where it's like, I'm not gonna lie, I just kind of feel like Michael McKean was miscast. Like, I feel like Annette O'Toole could still play this character, but he's just, as you said, so traditional, so Republican that it doesn't feel like Jebediah. And I feel like there is a storyline where Jebediah and Rian actually have their own new age version of being like, hey, relationships come and go. They're supposed to be for a time, and me and your mother's journey have just come to the end of the road.
Like, I thought that same thing. Yeah. I wanted that same thing. I wanted the core of these characters were to exist in the same situation. Have them have that new age philosophy towards love and paint it as like, it's almost like this thing of like Shawn, when and we'll talk about him, but he, at some point in the episode, he's like, I realize that I'm only kind of here for a little bit of time and I want to make the best of it. You could have tied that into this idea that, hey, relationships last for a certain period of time and you can just enjoy them while you can. Like, they could have weaved it together with the other storylines and with these characters more to make it more cohesive.
To your point, I feel like there is a way for them to have like this new age viewpoint of marriage and relationships. And Topanga still is upset. Topanga still like, I don't want this new age nonsense. I want a traditional parents. I like, this is why I left. You guys are always doing things like this. You named me Topanga. You named our sister Nebula. And now you're just breaking up this marriage, this one foundation that I had. Like, she could still be upset. She could still be angry. And I think it actually creates more conflict if her parents are fully new age, they fully have this new idea, and she has to deal with that, and they have to deal with that, this idea of marriage being not a failure but a successful separation, and that making her question marriage. All of that is right there, but instead we just get tropes, and I feel like that makes us feel cheated as an audience.
I had a bit of a problem with the whole, like, this whole motivation that, oh, we can get married because our parents got married young, so if they can do it, we can do it. It just feels like Topanga has been talking about marriage for a year and she never once brought up her parents as a motivation, as a factor in her decision making. It just feels like, again, something that they were like, all right, well, we need to spice up this finale. We got to break them up again. How can we do it? Like, it just feels like it was thrown in, because if her parents were really such a key part in her believing in love, then why has she's not mentioned them? It just like the thing that's frustrating is the building blocks of a finale are so that, like, I want to see character arcs come to a conclusion or a bridge into the next season that makes sense organically for the characters. And I don't mind them having Topanga and Cory question them getting married, because they're fucking 19. They should. But I'm just questioning if this is the right reason for them to question it, because Cory and Topanga live completely separate lives from her parents. So what difference does it make if they break up? I don't know. My parents got divorced, by the way, when I was like 4 or 5. So this whole idea of like being like damn near 20 and your parents divorcing, I really don't know what kind of like psychological effect that has on people. So I can't really speak to that.
I'll say this, from what I've done a lot of research on all of these things, and in general, no matter what age you are, your parents' relationship totally impacts you. And there are plenty of adults whose parents separate, who've been together forever. And it's a trauma response because you still are like, no, you guys have been together forever. You've been my foundation. You've been my testimony that love can last. Or like, even if it's a bad relationship, it's like, at least you guys stuck together. If I don't have this to look to, what do I have? So all of that makes sense that Topanga would respond this way. It's the accurate response for a child to have, especially a child who's engaged and thinking about her own marriage. All of that's fantastic. Sure. To your point, it's not earned. We don't know enough about Topanga this season. Topanga has been more window dressing this season than anything else. Yep. You put it so perfectly when you said that Shawn's arc feels earned. I know everything I need to know about Shawn. I know everything I need to know about Chet. I even kind of understand where Jack, like, we've been able to like put the pieces in to where Jack's behavior actually makes sense and Shawn's behavior makes sense. But Topanga's actions, we were just kind of reminded that she had parents. As you said, no one mentioned her parents when she got engaged, when she graduated. They didn't say, sorry, we missed your graduation. None of that. It's just kind of thrown in here, and we're forced in less than 30 minutes to put all these pieces together and have emotional stakes. And while Danielle does a really great job being emotional, I'm like, to your point, it didn't feel earned.
If there had just been a few scenes in the episodes, even in the later half of the season, of her just getting off the phone with her mom, just like talking wedding stuff and just being like, oh, my mom sounded a little weird, but like whatever, just give us something so that this is it feels like instead of concluding a story that had been leading up to for season 6, they're presenting us with a brand new one at the last minute. And I think that's what's really unsatisfying.
Correct. Also, to your point, where's her aunt? Like, I would have loved for her aunt to have like a guest appearance in one of these past, or get off the phone with her aunt and be like, my aunt has been speaking to my mom and they're both excited about the wedding. You know, something to let us know that Topanga's family is just around the corner, and something to kind of like hint that that's who we will be seeing. Sure. And instead, we get a surprised visit by them. They're played by completely different characters. Their personality is completely different than what we would have expected. And everything we're seeing with these parents, both Cory's parents and Topanga's parents, are all tropey. So as much potential as this episode has, and as high of a stakes it is for Topanga to learn of this information right before her wedding, we just feel cheated out of really great storylines.
Well, the truth is that they have reasons they can break up in and of themselves. Like, they have things that they can really explore, where Cory's been having these nightmares and, you know, Topanga's like, oh, well, Cory's starting to second guess things. And you have, I mean, we're going to get to the Shawn and Eric storyline, but the thing that's so pivotal about that is someone being like, hey, do you really feel this way or do you not feel this way? And I would just wish someone would have been to Topanga and be like, yo, why are you feeling like you got to get married to begin with? Like, why are you feeling like you got to rush into this? Like, have the same conversation with her. That could have been enough. That could have been earned.
Have Angela have a conversation with her?
Yes.
No, we can't have the two female characters speak to each other. But
you're
still.
right.
It's insane that Angela is right there, and Angela could be asking the same questions to Topanga that you just asked, which is like, what is the rush? Why does it have to be July 4th? I know that we'll get this scene later, but like Topanga going dress shopping, or a stack of magazines, you know, where she's really excited, and Angela's just like, you seem to really need this to happen soon. Yeah. What's going on? Like, I would have loved that. And then like have Topanga be like, my parents got married young. You don't understand. Sure. I'm really excited. And then have like this shining example that she has painted kind of crumble in front of our eyes.
There's a really interesting moment that I just want to throw in while we're talking about Cory and Topanga, where they're like, her parents are like, why do you think we let you stay here when we were in Pittsburgh? And Topanga was like, because you wanted me to finish my last year of high school. And Cory's like, no, it was because of me, right? Like, all of this is because of me. You didn't do this for me.
I highlighted that moment. The moment where they're like, why did you think we did this? Cory's like, because of me. And they're like, then why did you make we do this? Because of me. It's because of me, right? It's because I'm exceptional. That's the reason. And like literally what I love, because I took note, is Jedediah goes to Cory in a sincere way, but it's also really funny because the writing is trying to say this. Jedediah goes to Cory and says, this has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
And it's like, he doesn't say that to his daughter, the one who actually probably is like, oh, this is because of me, because that's how children internalize things. But he says this to Cory because he knows, and the show knows, that Cory makes everything about him.
Yeah. And it's interesting too that like clearly Cory is harboring internal guilt about Yale. He's harboring internal guilt about these things that, of course, he thinks are all about him, but I wonder how much of his actions are motivated by this guilt. Like, I mean, they brought up the Yale thing in the elevator scene in that Truth and Honesty episode. So it just feels like the Yale conversation is such a huge, like, they're trying to move on. They're trying to shake it off, but that could have been enough reason. That could have been enough reason for them to break up. Like, really, I don't want to keep harboring on this, but I wish there was a more earnest reason for them to question things.
Point, I would have, you know what I would have loved, and this is just fan theories out there. I would have loved for Topanga to crack right before her parents get here. And what I mean by that is I would have liked her to be like, I moved away from my parents for you. I gave up Yale for you. I have been there while you've blamed me through your entire family's things, and you won't set a date. Why won't you set a date? Like I would have liked her to like just get angry and her list off all these reasons and her to be like, we are getting married July 4th. My parents did it young. We did it young. I would have liked her to just like have this moment, and then her parents come in and they're like, hey, by the way, we're breaking up. And her being like, God damn it.
have it be the straw that breaks the camel's back versus throwing a bunch of straws on the camel out of nowhere. Because I love
that.
Like.
That's what it is. That's a great, it's a weirdly worded analogy, but it's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And then another thing, which is kind of played sincerely in a little bit, but when at the end, when Cory's like, oh, hey, Mr. Whoever, because it doesn't really matter, place that we were supposed to put on hold for the wedding. I don't think we're going to be able to do July. We're still thinking it over. I'm like, you don't just answer that. Topanga could have went head first and be like, you know what? We're getting married no matter what. You didn't have a conversation with her. You just gave away the reservation. Something that
the one thing she was excited about.
Exactly. Why would you do that? Oh God, it's insanity. And last things that I want to note with the Jedediah and Rian storyline, I am a little upset that they showed Jedediah being like, I'm gonna go for a walk. And he gets to go off for a walk, and we see Rian just kind of be like, oh, I'm holding it together. But then he comes back in and she's like, I can't do it anymore. I can't lie. And she's just crying. I'm like, why does of course, the wife, the one who breaks down and is making a whole spectacle of it all? And two, why could you not hold it together for like 5 more seconds? Like,
I feel like if you are in that contempt of a relationship where you can't be in the same room with each other, it might have been better to have a private conversation with your daughter versus having all of this show up when you're meeting, like essentially meeting the in-laws for the first time. Like, I can't believe that they wouldn't just have a private thing with Topanga versus like, hey, it's all out there. And I know like Cory's family, the Matthews are family, but like, are they? Because they were shaking hands like they were new.
Well, no, he said what is interesting is Jedediah says, Cory, if you stay, and then that's when Rian just like blurts out whatever she does. And he's like, oh, I thought she wouldn't say this in front of you. And it's just like, again, what is with this old fashioned like couple dynamic where it's like you hate each other, but like you don't even hate each other in a believable way. You just hate each other in like this trophy, almost conservative. What is the word I'm looking for? Anglo-Saxon way. You know what I mean? Like wasp. Sure. It's they feel like almost like wasps, and it's like, what are you doing? Who are these people? I would have liked for Jedediah to be the one to break. If we want to talk about who Jedediah is, he's the one who would have been like, I just love you so much. I'm so sad that we're not making this happen. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I expect from the character we've already met.
There was a really interesting moment where Rion, it's such a weird name. Where she's like, you guys can get through anything. And she's like, marriage isn't something you have to get through. And I was just like, oh, this is really interesting. Like, let's have these people who are ending their marriage have an honest conversation about like, hey, it's not all roses and butterflies. Like, shit gets real.
What I'll say is, I like the potential of this storyline. I just kind of wish that we had earned wherever we've gone, and I wish that we had even stayed true. Again, to me, it's more true to the characters that we've known. For Jedediah to be the more emotional one. We've never met Rion. So if she was like this steadfast, almost waspy person, that would actually give us a lot to play off of. And it would have stayed true to the type of people who raised Topanga, the Topanga we've come to know and love.
But again, this is a Topanga for season 6. This is not season 1 Topanga, and these seem to be two completely different characters.
They're very, very different. Even her parents. Okay, so to that point, I do want to talk about Eric now, because the Eric storyline gives me a lot of. I get, like, I was trying to figure out how to organize this section because it's so many things that come from it. But what I'll do is we'll just talk about Eric and his relationships. This is called State of the Unions. Let's talk about Eric and his relationships with everyone else. We'll go Eric and Shawn, Eric, Jack, and Rachel, and then Eric and Feeny.
Sure. I love that Eric and Shawn have a scene. They talk about on the pod all the time that like they weren't given very many scenes together because they just constantly made each other laugh. But separate from like whatever was happening behind the scenes that kept them from having connections and communications with each other, as an audience member, it's a little weird. I know that they're playing it meta, like, haha, isn't it funny that like we lived together and we didn't talk? And it's just like, no, that's actually like Shawn's basically your little brother, bro. Like, why are you season 6 and now all of a sudden being like, let's talk? Like, I get that it's funny, but it also just kind of doesn't make sense for them not to have any relationship when they were roommates.
I liked that little bit of like, oh, we haven't had a one-on-one conversation in the last 6 years. Even when we lived together. When was that? That was literally last year. That like little bit of meta actually worked for me. But what I find interesting is I like Shawn. I like that Shawn was like, hey, do you need to talk? I liked that Shawn, who's we've seen, and it is earned, he's more sensitive, he's more aware, he's more in touch with his emotions. So this idea that he would see Eric struggling and be like, hey man, you seem to need to talk. I really loved that. It felt completely earned. And finally someone looked at Eric and was like, hey, you don't seem okay.
Definitely. I was like, so many of his peers and his family have just been like ignoring that. He's been steadily getting, I would say, I mean, like, it seems as though he's getting more depressed as the season goes on. And so for Shawn to find, Eric's like, he like missed a shot and pull. And he was like, oh, it doesn't matter. I'm a loser anyway. And it's just like, bro, like, I'm so glad that he was just like, are you okay? Like, do you want to talk? Like, we can chat. Like, and this is actually my favorite part of the entire episode is their storyline, because, in terms of bromances, in terms of just like male friendships and male bonding, like, just for a man to look at another man and be like, hey, I see that you're struggling. Let's actually sit down and have a communication about this. Like, I'm struggling. I'll be vulnerable with you. And like, we can have this conversation. And even Eric, who seems a little bit hesitant to be as vulnerable as Shawn, is appreciative of that vulnerability. So I just thought that was an amazing dynamic.
It is. And I want to note, especially since we've gotten to know them a little bit more, this felt so Ryder and Will. Like it 100%. Felt Ryder and Will through and through. Like it felt like a situation they would have found themselves in. It felt like they were talking in the way that they talk to each other.
Yeah.
Like it was just so amazing to see. I'm like, oh, this is like purely Ryder and Will's relationship. And it's great that to like see this come across because it does make sense for, as you said, Shawn, who is essentially Eric's adoptive brother, for them to have like this one-on-one time in a way that I wouldn't even expect Shawn to have with Jack. Like it actually does make sense. You know?
I really love that Shawn talked about his experiences on the road, his like healing journey and what he was able to learn from it. I every time he mentions it, I really wish it was something we were shown. I wish that like in one episode we were just cut to the scene of him in the back of the trailer looking up at the stars, like just a wide shot, like something. But the fact that he is like using his experience and his growth to try to help his friend, and I love that Shawn is finally the first person to be like, bro, do you even like her or did you just like the competition? And like, finally, we've been saying this all season, like finally.
Next place that I was going with this conversation, which is the idea that Eric is just like, I just loved her so much. And Shawn's like, what did you love about her? Tell me what it is about her. Describe what it is that she does for you. What do you guys have in common? And all you can say is that she's pretty. And I like the fact
Shawn
that
is
like,
advocating. Yeah, he's advocating for treating women like people. It's like such a strange thing on the show to but again, just be like, do you like her like her?
To me, it's so Ryder. I don't know how to describe it. It felt such like a Ryder moment of Ryder being like, do you even know her enough to say that you like her this much? And also this idea for Shawn to acknowledge Jack's journey and be like, oh, you mean when Jack's dad died?
Yeah.
You know, like when he was going through all of that, and for Eric to play it off and be like, oh, you know, he used that as like an in, but it's like, no, he was dealing with stuff as well. I'm just saying all of our theories earlier of like Jack and Rachel getting together more so out of grief, for Eric to be more obsessed with the competition with Jack than he is with actually getting Rachel. It's very interesting to me, and I enjoyed it. I loved this scene. I don't know how to say it. I just loved this scene. It felt so earned in everything else that we were doing.
You know, we're at May 2023 at this point. The Pod Meets World is doing season 2, and I couldn't help but see comparisons between this episode and episode 202, which is Pairing Off. That's the episode in which Cory doesn't know the girl's name, and Eric's just like, oh, it doesn't matter, just find a girl, just say hello. Like, and at the end of that episode, the parents sit down and they have basically the conversation that Shawn has with Eric in this episode, which is like, you have to know more than her name. You have to like know this person. Like, what do you actually like about them? It's just, again, not a bad lesson, but it feels like a lesson that has been taught to Eric previously.
All right. So to that point, I want to talk about Eric, Jack, and Rachel.
Yeah.
Because how do you feel about Eric showing up to Jack and Rachel's? Because to me, it felt very much underhanded. Like it felt like I'm coming to apologize, but I'm actually here to stir up some shit. Like I realized that I don't know anything about Rachel, and chances are Jack doesn't either. You know what I mean? Like that's what it felt like to me.
I could totally see that because of the way that the conversation played out. But I feel like it has more to do with the fact that Jack stepped into like Eric's competition like thing, being like, yeah, the competition was so fun. Like if he had responded differently, if he had been like, you know what, that was a real motivation for me at the beginning, but I've really come to like love and appreciate Rachel. He didn't. Because he hasn't. Because he don't know her.
Well, what I'm saying is, I feel like Eric kind of went there to be like, hey, you know how little you know about each other? Hey, remember how this started off as like kind of like a bet? And you and I we more so just wanted to win. You remember that?
Yeah.
Hey, Rachel, do you remember how little you know about Jack? Like, do you remember that? It was like, anyway, peace. Like that's what it felt like to me.
No, yeah, that is true. Like, I wonder if there was the thing is that story-wise, it wouldn't make sense for that to be his motivation. But to your point, I
feel like here's the thing. I'm not saying that this was actually what was written on the page. I'm saying story-wise, it does kind of make sense for him because something that we haven't kind of quite said, but Will has talked about there was a potential spinoff.
Yes, I want to talk about that.
And this felt like, this is what he's talking about. This is the moment that they are setting up for Eric to move to Los Angeles and start his own thing.
I thought that same thing.
A huge part of me was like, it actually would make sense for him to get like a little dig in because he's been hurting this entire time from their relationship. So for him to kind of like he didn't say goodbye to them.
Yeah.
For him to just kind of be like, hey, I'm going to drop some truths and let's see if your relationship can survive this. I'm out. You're like, it's a little vindictive, and it's vindictive in a way that like I'm not approving, but it would make story sense. You know what I'm saying?
I guess part of me was hoping that his intentions were pure enough in the point where he truly did want to apologize for treating Rachel like a prize to be won, that he truly did want to like give them their blessing, and that he had a sigh of relief that was genuine for him doing that. I would like to believe that, but all of your points are still accurate.
I was gonna say, like, does he really apologize for treating her like an object, or does he just acknowledge that he did? You know, like he says
that is very true.
He says, you have my blessing, but we didn't need your blessing. Like, that's the thing that I'm talking about. It's like, it's kind of like this hubris of being like, you know what? You guys do you. I'm happy that you have each other. Like, that's kind of like, I'm not saying, because we're going to get a bunch of people who are being like, Eric was sincere and he went, and I was like, no, sure, whatever. The writing's not good enough for me to say that he was. I'm saying that there's enough space for me to argue that it was vindictive. It came off as like a power move to do right before you leave the scene.
I wonder if it would have felt better if Jack and Rachel had met Eric at the student union versus Eric just showing up at their place unannounced. Like, I wonder if that would have made a bigger difference in making his actions feel more sincere. Because, I mean, the what you're getting at is the fact that Eric brings up all of this, like, hey, I treated Rachel in a way that was not out of pure love. Like, I treated her like a prize to be won, an object. And now Jack is like, yeah, I did the same. And so when he leaves, Rachel and Jack are just left to be like, well, what even is this now? And that is, well, hey, can I point out one thing too about this? When Shawn and Eric are talking, he's like, it's not fair. Like, your dad died and he used it as a way to like get her in with grieving. He's not actually wrong, because what he's touching on is the fact that like this grief played a major part in their relationship getting together. And although he kind of says it in a way that's kind of insensitive, he is bringing up a true point about how the role of grief and what that did to motivate Jack and Rachel to even consider this relationship at all.
I know you don't watch Gossip Girl, but there's a character in Gossip Girl called Georgina, and she's just like chaos personified. Love her character, but she'll do stuff like this. Well, she'll just come in and she'll just be like, oh, truth bomb. How mad can you be? Georgina is right. Like, did she come in here to stir up some shit? Absolutely. But you have to think about what she said, because she's not wrong. And that's kind of what I feel. It felt very mean girlish for him to come to their place, drop all these truths, kind of get Jack to be like, yeah, I did participate. Remember when we like just come in and get excited for what she would look like and what she would wear, and we just kind of like objectified her as a person.
Rachel's like, should I go?
Yeah, exactly. And he's like, no, you can stay for this. That's what I'm saying. Anyway, you have my blessing. Enjoy. Bye. Like it felt messy, but like in a way that feels right for someone who had been hurt to behave.
Yeah, there's still a little bit of pain there that's kind of fueling some of those remarks, for sure. I'm more so interested in the way Eric is talking with Feeney.
That's where I was going next.
This really is the thing that led me to think, oh, this is the spinoff moment. And it's interesting, on the podcast, they were like, they said that they were planning it like season 3 or 4 or 5, but it seems like it's clear here that like he was about to say goodbye to Feeney. He was like doing that thing that Shawn did when he was about to leave for his road trip into Topanga. He's like, bye, I have to say goodbye to Topanga. It just felt like that. And it's interesting that Eric grouped Feeney in with all of these people that he's losing. Like,
I love that
him getting married to the dean, like, was like, oh, he didn't do anything. Like, it wasn't Jack and Rachel where like there's like clearly awkwardness and tension. It's like there's no reason. Like, you and the dean and Feeney have been having pleasant conversations together, and it seems, I understand his fear, like things are gonna change. You can't just show up to Feeney's house unannounced, but I don't feel like it was a I don't know, I just thought it was very interesting.
Well, no, here's the thing. I think him mentioning I'm losing Feeney to the dean is actually his way of saying I'm respecting Feeney's new life. So Feeney and the dean, my parents have a new child. My brother's getting married. My roommates are together. I lost Tommy. I literally have no one who is for me. I haven't built other friendships outside of these friend groups. I haven't excelled at school in the way that I should have. And I don't have a job or a career to fall back on. I have nothing of my own. And even the little things that I did have that would get me through, such as conversations with Feeney's or romps with Jack, or even like being the older brother, I don't have those things anymore. So there's nowhere for me here.
Oh man, I would have loved it if this was the episode that pivoted to make Shawn and Eric a friendship. Like, if that's the what came from this was Shawn being like, hey, everything you're going through, you feeling like you've lost everything. Like, I relate to you more than I relate to Cory at this point. Cory is constantly busy with Topanga. You're worried about you not having people because they're in relationships. Like, me and you need to hang out more. And they hint at that in this episode, like, oh, we should talk more. But in season 7, you'll see that doesn't really play out. And so I just felt like it would have been a perfect opportunity, because everything you're saying about Eric, I'm just like, Shawn gets this more than anyone. Shawn has gone through literally all of this.
Which is why I loved the Shawn and Eric moment.
Yeah.
But to me, they, at this point in time, to just kind of like stay where they're at, they are thinking about writing off Eric. So it makes sense to me that you're right in the sense that Shawn and Eric have all of these things in common and Shawn understands. But I like the idea of it being too little too late. It being like Shawn being like, oh, hey, I see you. And Eric being like, I've already packed my car and nobody knows. You know what I mean?
Totally. But here's my argument. And it's more so the fact that they didn't move forward with the spinoff, and that Eric did stay through season 7 and they didn't develop this more.
Well, I don't know that yet because I haven't seen season 7.
sorry, quarter in the jar. I went forward. No, that's totally true.
I'm reading the show where it's at.
Sure.
But to your point, I will say that we have such potential with all of these storylines. And one of the things that we have been saying continuously is the potential to be great television is all there. And Boy Meets World's reputation with taking us there has kind of been lost this season. And for this to be the season finale, it really does ask you to go on this journey of Topanga and Cory are concerned about their relationship. Topanga's only example of a long-lasting relationship is being challenged. Eric feels like he's nobody. And guess what? We have a wedding to bring us all together. All of that is right there. Shawn and Angela are hinting and playfully flirting, and we never quite go the distance.
Yeah.
That's
there's and to keep referencing Pod Meets World, they had someone on who was talking about they would hide a little lobster in the sets.
Did you notice it?
And when Shawn and Angela are holding hands in Feeney's wedding, you can see in the flower arrangements that there's a lobster hitting within the flower arrangements. And
I need to go look because I've been thinking about playing the game of Find the Lobster.
Yeah.
Because I
found the lobster.
That's so great. I love it. And okay, so to that point, why is this wedding in the living room? We have a backyard. A side yard.
I assumed that they were just like, what's the cheapest way we can do this?
No, I know why it is for television.
Yeah,
but whenever television does things like this, where they're like, let's have a wedding in the one set that we clearly have. Like, I've just been watching Charmed. And again, we have a wedding in the living room. And I'm like, how many people are getting married in their living room? Especially in locations where we know there's a backyard. Feeny has a yard. What are we doing?
Totally. It almost felt like there would be more room and more like maybe at the student union or like somewhere else. Like the Matthews living room seems like a place. Like I wouldn't look at that living room and be like, oh, we could shove 30 to 50 people in here. It's like, what? How? This place looks pretty small.
I just want to point out, again, it's television. We do this all the time in TV. People get married in living rooms. We get married in familiar places. That's not my point. My point is, let's cut back on the student union budget a little bit and let's redecorate the student union balcony where they always look before. Like, this should be an outdoor wedding. It is May, we've established in the show. It's good weather in Philadelphia. We have more people than we were expecting to show up. We have a backyard. Let's just do a backyard wedding.
How did you feel about this idea that like Feeney's story arc is really interesting because they really throw his marriage with the dean in like such a like it's like a background thing that's happening. Like it's not a main focus. And I'm like, I think George deserves better. Like, I think George deserves to have like a relation because when they give their vows, I'm like, they have such a sweet and genuine relationship, maybe sweeter than anyone else on the show. And it would have just been nice to just like get into their relationship dynamic a little bit more than for them to just pop in. Hey, we're getting married. Pop in at the end. All right, we're getting married now.
I would have liked a Feeney moment, either this episode or previous episode or at some point in time where we talk about Feeney's first wife.
Yes.
I like when he was like, I've been looking for love, secretly looking for love my entire life. I was like, but you've been married before. And we know that you're a widower. So I would have liked for Feeney to have a moment with Alan or Cory, who's newly engaged, or Shawn, who's unsure about Angela, or Topanga, whose parents have just broken up, or Eric, who doesn't know his place in the world. I would have liked for Feeney to have a moment with anyone, even Amy, as a supportive neighbor, and talk about his previous marriage and why you can have more than one love in your life, and how excited he is.
You're right. Like Feeney would be the perfect person to talk to Topanga about how you can find love again, or just like what happens after marriage. Like he could have made that situation so much easier for her to understand, or she could have even just like looked at Feeney during the wedding and maybe gotten some inspiration. It could have been unspoken.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm just saying. Like, to your point, the Feeney storyline, I was like, I feel played a little bit because you used my love for the character of Feeney and my love of Bill Daniels to make this moment sweet. And you didn't actually earn this moment, but I am happy that I have this moment.
Can I ask you a question? Would this episode make sense to you if Be True was removed from the season?
No, not at all.
So my argument that episode was thrown in last minute to set up this wedding, I feel like stands.
And I agree with you. When I watched this, I was like, again, it was called State of the Unions. I completely misremembered this season. I thought Cory and Topanga's wedding was the season finale of this season. And that would kind of make sense. But the idea that Feeney is the one who's getting married, I was like, what? Why?
Like
a few episodes ago,
I was like, oh, they're not building up to a wedding. And you're like, yeah, they are. And I was like, bro, you don't know. They're not building up to Cory and Topanga's wedding. Not this season.
Well, but again, even then, it's like, where is Bill's bachelor party? You know?
Yeah, Eric
like,
didn't think to do something for Feeny for his wedding. Like, come
Eric
on, bro.
would absolutely think to do something for his wedding. Again,
Eric's the best man.
If only as a distraction.
Yeah. And his last hurrah with Feeny before he says goodbye to him. Like, we shove this all into make this a two-parter. Like, make this a like why last week couldn't have
why did we need last week's episode when we have so much meat on this bone? And as you said, a two-parter for sure. And I don't know. I feel like I've done everything I wanted to say about this episode. How about you? Anything else?
Yeah, I just, overall, I just felt like it was kind of a bummer finale for a bummer season. And in terms of structure, I want to just talk about a season structure for a second, because I feel like in terms of how a season finale is successful is really the 5 episodes that lead up to the season finale. There should be something that ramps up, right? That's why the whole idea of May sweeps or sweeps month came about. It was like, we're putting our best episodes to attract as many viewers as possible because we're leading up to the finale. And I feel like this show just dropped the ball so much on building up to the finale and making this finale significant. It all just feels like they were kind of scrambling for ideas and didn't really have a clear path of what was going to happen. Even when on Pod Meets World, they'll talk about it's, first of all, it was a different era of television where people would watch an episode, 1 out of every 4 episodes, the average viewer would watch, is what they were saying. So they were like, we have to make it structured so anyone can jump in. That's fine. But you have build up for all of these other storylines. You have build up with Shawn. You have build up with Eric. So why can't we do the same for Feeny and Topanga and these other characters?
Especially considering that there's so much that, and then also this would be a great season to end with Cory realizing, as Jedediah said, this has nothing to do with you. For once, boy, you guys are always like, it's boy meets world. Well, part of boy meeting world is realizing that the world does not revolve around you. And it would have been great had this entire season been a buildup of Cory to constantly being like, hey, I'm inserting myself into the narrative. And for the season finale to be sincerely, this has nothing to do with you, would have been a great moment of being like, oh, other people have problems and storylines and things going on that I will not have any involvement in. And I have to learn that lesson too. I would have loved to have that been the whole, and in fact, I could excuse Cory's behavior this season. If
I was going to say that I don't know that I see an arc for Cory whatsoever this season. Shawn and Eric clearly have arcs that I'm just from the beginning to the end, I can see it. And I'm like, what is Cory's arc this season? It was at first, I don't understand college and I need help. Feeny, help me get the classes that I need. And I'm struggling. I punched this teacher, navigating actual college. And then it just turned into relationship just bullshit. It turned into him creating problems where he didn't need to, him really disrespecting Topanga left and right. And for what? For what ending? For this? For him to cancel a venue that she was excited about? What is the arc of this main central character of this show?
That seems like a conversation for our season 6 recap. So we will hold that conversation.
Okay.
But I will say this, hell of a freshman year.
Right. Yeah.
This freshman year, absolutely one for the books. Do you have a bra moment for this episode?
I mean, it's not really a bra moment, but I did think it was a little cold when Eric was just like, are you talking about your dead dad, Shawn?
Well, I like that Shawn responded with, you're such a sensitive guy.
Yeah.
I thought that was
amazing. There wasn't really a ton of just things that were inappropriate or things that didn't age well. The thing that I just really had a main problem with was Topanga's parents and how those characters were treated, how they were written, how they came in as a central motivation for a character that never mentions her parents. It just feels thrown in and sloppy and lazy.
Yeah, exactly. With you, I'm That's my bruh moment would be the fact that Jedediah and Rian are so different than expected. So there's that. And then I do have what I would call a bruh blip, which again is just the idea that Feeny is having a wedding inside this living room when we have a backyard literally on the other side of those doors.
Totally. Oh, another kind of bruh thing that I thought of was Jedediah just being like, yeah, it was back in the day where like a woman wouldn't question her husband in front of company or something like that. And I was just like,
yeah. Well, they were talking about Ally McBeal in a very weird way, in a way that it made it very clear he has never seen Ally McBeal.
Yeah, and it just seemed like anti-women and just the way that he was just generally talking. The one thing I want to give Jedediah, the one credit I want to give to him, he is right. There has never been a better show on television since Alf. With the exception of The Boy Meets World, Alf is classic quality television, and I encourage everyone to rewatch.
I'm going to ignore that and just move on to the Feeny lesson. Okay. What is your Feeny lesson?
My Feeny lesson...
Do you have one?
I'm truly thinking, like, I couldn't think of one earlier, and I don't really know what the lesson of this episode is, other than to like have open communication. Like, I don't know. I really don't know.
I ask because I don't have one. I don't know if I can, like, from all of the storylines, I don't really know if there is a lesson. The one grain that I can find is Shawn talking to Eric and being like, hey, how much do you really know about this person? How much of this, all of your feelings are based in reality? Like, that is the one kind of like crumb I can take away, but everything else like just doesn't really have a lesson or even a direction.
I love what Shawn says to Eric about just like feeling like you're just so small, and that, you know, his main motivation came from when he realized that being around the people he loved is what matters the most to him. But that's not really a lesson for the episode. That's Shawn capping off his season arc.
Yeah,
it doesn't really speak for what the other characters are going through. I mean, if anything, it just talks about how like how marriages and relationships, they're just complicated. Like, relationships and marriages are complicated. You have Alan and Amy, you have Feeny and the Dean, you have Topanga's parents, and they're all at different points in their relationship. You see how Rachel and Jack's relationship affects Eric and is affecting themselves. You have Shawn and Angela and kind of like this weird relationship. It just feels like relationships are up in the air right now. Like, relationships are undefined.
I think that's what you're saying is we got to check in on the different states of each union.
Oh shit! Yeah,
that's where the title came from. Yeah, absolutely. What grade are you giving this?
C.
Solid C.
Solid C. A solid C for the fact that, like, I'm glad that we're finally addressing a lot of the central conflicts that these characters have had this season, but seeing the fact that it took to the season finale for them to actually get to it. See, in the sense that this is supposed to be a season finale. This is supposed to be a major moment that we look forward to as an audience, and it just did not deliver. And it left me on such a like bummer, sour note, which is so reflective of how I felt for this entire season.
Homework. What homework do you? Oh, wait. I didn't give mine.
Yeah.
Which was C. I just, so we know. Yeah. So we're clear. It's C. Homework. What homework do you have?
I encourage everyone to watch Alf on Hulu.
Ask if that was your homework. Are you gonna say
not even fucking joking when I say that Alf was the first television show I ever got excited about as a kid. That was like the show that I was like, when I first started watching television, I was like, oh, this is funny. This is because it was I
had an Alf doll. Yeah,
we all had Alf dolls. Like, even if you didn't watch the show, like, I don't know, them mentioning it, I was just like, damn, I loved that show. And I don't know how well it's aged, and I'm sure it's probably really poor, but like, it made me be like, reflect on my love for the show and how just interesting it was and how obsessed with it. It was my first entry into primetime television. So
if you have an Alf rewatch podcast, hit us up.
Oh my God, please let us get on that Alf rewatch. For those who are too young to understand what I'm talking about, Alf is a alien that lands on Earth and is taken in by a white family in California, and it's just about them just having like this comedic ET scenario of like this, because he's not just an alien, he's like a wisecracking comedian. Like
exactly.
He's like Andrew Dice Clay as ET. Like, I don't know. It's very interesting.
That's I've been trying to sit here and thinking of different podcast names for an Alf rewatch show.
Ooh.
So if you could think of one, like hit us up, because I've been trying to like spitball. Go.
I was just gonna say that here are things I will never forget. Alf has 4 stomachs and he's from a planet called Melmac, and they eat cats like burgers. These are things that I absorbed as children that I think about till this day. When I see a cat, sometimes I just think about Alf in the back of my head, and it's really interesting.
That's hilarious. My homework, I already told you I was gonna gush about this.
Yeah, you did.
I've been excited to talk about this. Fast X, or the 10th episode, the 10th movie in the Fast and Furious franchise, which became, if we're talking season finales, it was supposed to be the series finale of the Fast and Furious franchise that they have now broken into 3 movies. And I got to tell you, I watched it and I was like, I deserve 3 of these. Wow. I absolutely enjoyed it. Like, you have to go into Fast and Furious. Just like my husband was like, oh, so I just turned my brain off. And I was like, yep, that's the best way to enjoy this movie.
Yes.
And so much fun, so much nonsense, no physics, but the stakes have never been higher. Every actor knows what movie they're in. And one of the reasons why I keep championing this movie is because Jason Momoa is in this movie.
Yeah.
And he plays the villain, but he does so in a way where you're like, you were having the time of your life. And I looked at an interview and he was like, this may have been the funnest role I've ever had. I was like, wow. It showed. Because he takes it to a 12. He understands.
He Nick Cages it.
He Nick Cages it in the best way. And you're like, yes, I need you to do this in everything that you're doing. He is having so much fun. I'm having so much fun. Everything that he does. I don't want to have any spoilers, but there's just so much camp happening in this role. I'm like, I need everyone to see it. I need more people to understand the joy that is Jason Momoa in this character. So yeah, go watch.
You have sold me on this. Like, I've watched every Fast and the Furious movie. I'm not one of those people who write it off, because like you, I love bad movies, and these are just like the best bad movies. Absolutely. I go into it with the same expectation you would a Sharknado movie. Just like, this is just for popcorn and entertainment. I still kind of like pinch myself at the idea that like in 2000 Vin Diesel came out with a movie about people stealing combination TV VCRs, and we are 10 movies later and they are superheroes.
By the way, they completely acknowledge all of this. And that's really that's what I'm saying. It's such a self-aware movie, but it's self-aware in ways like the villain is very self-aware of like, oh, I'm a villain in a Fast and Furious franchise. Ooh. The actors that they bring, like casting, they cast people where I was like, there are new characters where I'm like, yes, why have you not been in a Fast and Furious movie? This is where you belong. And so I was so hyped with that. The women that they brought in, I was like, yep, you are a Fast and Furious female character. That's the type of person that we expect to get outside of Michelle Rodriguez. And that's the type of, the type of storyline that I expect. So all of it is just, it's so self-aware. It knows what it wants to be. It also knows the limitations of Vin Diesel. And again, I just love that. I don't want to spoil anything, but I just want to say that every single storyline knows what it was supposed to be and executes it in the way that you would want a Fast and Furious movie to do so.
All right. Oh, I'm excited.
All right. So if you get as hyped as we did, or as I did for Fast and Furious, for Boy Meets World, make sure that you reach out to us at Boy Meets World at all of the places. Make sure that you listen to our podcast in the place that you are listening to podcasts, in the place that you like to enjoy podcasts. T, anything else?
No, like definitely, guys. Give us your thoughts on this specific episode. How do you feel like the finale concluded? Are you satisfied with Cory and Topanga's arc? How do you feel about Feeney's wedding? Like, give us all of your thoughts, and don't forget to give us your questions for our season 6 recap, which is going to be coming next week.
Outside of that, you guys make sure to continue to dream,
try,
and do good.
Hey, do some damn good, y'all.
Later, bruds.
Later.
You can just hang up now.
When this boy meets world.